Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 339, The Most Difficult Part About Being a Widow.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. How are you? What is happening? I don't think I've given an update in a while. Not a heck of a lot to report other than heading to Vegas for a New Kids on the Block concert. Yes, I am a New Kids on the Block fan. I am not ashamed to admit it. I'm going to Las Vegas with my dear friend from middle school. We actually met because I was wearing a New Kids on the Block tour jacket in middle school, and she commented on it, told me it was a nice jacket. A friendship formed. We have seen many New Kids on the Block concerts together as kids and a couple as adults. So we're going to go see them at their residency in Las Vegas. So by the time you hear this, hopefully I'll be back from that trip, but that should be a good time. Also, coaching on the couch was a lot of fun. I talked about that a little bit. It's an event that I have for some of my Mom Goes On clients and graduates where they come to my house and we coach for a day. It was magical. And right before that, I'm trying to remember the timeline, I got the shingles. So that was fun. Do not recommend, definitely intend to get the vaccine, but here we are on the other side of it. The itching has finally stopped. I feel much, much better. So, okay. The most difficult part about being a widow. First of all, there is no one difficult part. It's different for everyone, right? So in this episode, I'm not going to tell you what the hardest part should be. I just want to help you think about whatever feels hardest for you right now in a way that makes it easier. We want to create more ease. So in this episode, I'm going to cover what I notice tends to be the most difficult parts of widowhood for the widows that I work with. And I have a long list to share with you. I hope you will see yourself in that list. Then I'm going to talk about some ways to think about what is difficult about being a widow that make it less difficult. So there's so much value in thinking about what we think, right? And then I'm going to give you a couple of tools that you can use. You can use them immediately to start bringing a little more ease to whatever is feeling most difficult for you right now. All right. So here are some of the things that I have noticed that widows experience as difficult. It is not universal, but this is what I notice. As I give you this list, my hope is that you will notice what resonates with you, that you will let this be a reminder that while you might often feel alone in widowhood, because that's a super common experience, you're actually not. There are lots of other widows out there who maybe they don't have the exact same circumstances that you do. Maybe they haven't had the exact same experience, but they are struggling with many of the similar things that you're struggling with. They really do understand some of the difficult parts of widowhood. They are there too. So, and I say these things not to bring you down, but to validate the experience that you're having because you're having it. It is valid. All right. So here are some of the things that I notice widows struggle with that are the most difficult parts. So number one, making decisions alone. When you go from having a person that you always run decisions by, that you make decisions with, that backs you up after you have made a decision, that helps calm you down while you are making a decision, that can help you talk things out with or through with, to having to do that all on your own, that can be difficult. You don't have them to support you if it doesn't work out, right? It's kind of all on you. And that can be a pretty difficult experience, just making decisions alone. Feeling guilty when moments of joy appear. Have you had this happen? It's like our brain won't let us win. So it can be kind of difficult when you're experiencing a lot of intense emotion, none of it that you're enjoying. Then you do have a moment that feels lighter. Maybe even you laugh, and then you feel guilty about that. Not anybody's favorite part of grief. Kind of a difficult moment. It's also difficult when you're wondering who you are. You're looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person that you see. And you're wondering what life is supposed to be like. That can be particularly difficult. Also very common. I remember vividly looking in the mirror and thinking, I know that's me, but who is that person? Who am I now? What do I even want? I don't know. And the weirdness of that. So you are not alone in that. Can also be very difficult, and I have seen it happen more times than I could possibly count, to navigate friendships that change or friendships that disappear. This is so, so common in widowhood. Our friends that we think can hang can't. And there are secondary losses all over the place in that regard that we have to adjust to the way we thought we would be supported, the way we wanted to be supported, and to grieve that that support isn't there, that those people sometimes just don't have it in them or don't want to be that for us. And that in and of itself can be really, really difficult. Evenings and weekends, if you know, you know. The moments when life quiets down enough and the loneliness gets louder, right? You're not able to distract yourself so much because you're not moving from place to place, or you're not at work, or you're not with friends. You get home, evenings, weekends, the time when you usually would have spent with your person, and now there's nothing to distract you, and whoosh, here comes the sadness, and here comes the loneliness, here comes the worry, here comes the anxiety. So it can be such a difficult experience. And I have had that question asked to me so many times. Is it normal that the weekends are so hard? Yes, it is normal. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. It's also difficult when we acknowledge that one of the things we lost when our person died was we lost the witness to our life, right? We lost that person who we were talking to about our day, who was seeing our struggles and celebrating our successes and there with us through all of it, right? That person who was maybe not even always out loud, but at least silently witnessing the life that we were living. And there's something in that that is so hard to lose. Another thing that can be difficult, and I think you can kind of intellectually understand this, but I don't think you can really actually truly understand it until you go through it, which is that losing your partner doesn't affect one area of your life. It affects every single area of your life, all of them. It challenges your identity, your sense of self, your sense of purpose, your social connections, your sense of safety. And it's very difficult to appreciate until you're in it how hard it is to have every single area of life impacted. We also don't realize how much of our self-concept and how much of our self-confidence we were leveraging from our relationship or from our partner's belief in us. And when that is taken away, and we didn't ask for it to be taken away, it's really difficult. There's also a loss of shared identity. There is something that happens in our brain, and for good reason, to meet our attachment needs, right? Where our identities kind of overlap. So before our relationship, there was us and, there was the other person, and that one person and that other person overlapped and became a we. And so losing that we is kind of like losing a limb. It's like losing an arm or losing a leg. It doesn't make sense to our human brain, to the brain that is designed to meet our attachment needs. It just absolutely does not make sense. The phantom pains, just like someone who has, lost an arm or a leg experiences phantom pain, that appendage is no longer there, but yet they experience actual physical pain. That happens in grief too, right? It can be actually physically painful. And if you don't understand this, then it can be really easy to question yourself and make yourself wrong or wonder what's happening. Think you're crazy. I always remember how many times I intellectually knew that he died, and yet the garage door would go up and I would think, oh, he's home. Or I would pick up the phone and try to text him. I know he died, but my brain doesn't know yet. It's also a good time to remind you, you probably know this if you've been listening to me for a while, but time alone does not heal grief. Time is necessary, but time alone does not do the work. But we do need time to pass, right? We do need enough time to pass because we need our brain to relearn, to have enough exposure to the new data that person isn't coming back, that they really did die, so that its ability to predict is accurate again. And so give yourself lots of grace and compassion when your brain is still in that process of learning. It doesn't exactly happen overnight, even though we wish it would. A few more things that make grief difficult and make widowhood difficult. And I talk about this one all the time too. Our culture sucks at talking about grief. We just really suck at it. We like to avoid it. We don't like to talk about it. And a lot of what's floating around out there is outdated or unhelpful. And so if we don't have accurate information about grief, then of course we're going to be less prepared for it than we could be to navigate it. So we don't know it's going to be such a full body experience because we're not talking about it. We don't anticipate the widow fog because we're not talking about it. We don't know it's going to feel like we lost a limb. We are not prepared for counterfactual thinking or secondary losses. We imagine we'll feel sad, but we don't understand that it's going to be a full body experience that is so much more than what we have been taught that it will be. And that makes it really difficult. A lot of us are still buying into the myth that time heals. That makes it more difficult because we're hoping and praying that the passage of time will do the work. And like I said before, it's necessary, but also it's not all that's necessary. We actually have to figure out, how do I support myself in this? How do I figure out how to let these feelings flow through? A lot of women experience spousal loss or partner loss at a time in their lives when other things are shifting and converging. And those things by themselves can be enormously difficult. I see it's like the perfect storm. We've got like a combination of maybe empty nesting, perimenopause, menopause, maybe retirement, right? All of these big life changes that are happening at one time. And then you lose what felt like your foundation. And yet all of these other things are still shifting and converging and changing. And the cumulative effect of that can be really difficult. We're also bought and sold the idea that happiness is the goal. Happiness over aliveness. And happiness limits us to the emotions that we have decided are desirable. But most of what we experience in grief is not desirable. But it's valuable. It's important, right? In context, what we experience in grief, the emotions on the lower end of the scale for the most part, right? Not that there's any emotion that is not included in the experience of grief. They all, of course, are. But predominantly, we hang out a lot at the bottom of that scale, right? The undesirable emotions, the sadness, the loneliness, the grief, all the ick. And all the ick is what makes all the good stuff possible. Without the contrast, we wouldn't value the good stuff, right? So they all go together. But we aren't taught that. And we're also taught that the goal is to feel the stuff at the top. And that can make widowhood more difficult because we often try to talk ourselves out of our own emotions. We try to talk ourselves out of the sadness that we feel. Other people don't have the capacity to be with us in our sadness. So they try to talk us out of how we feel. They don't know how to feel okay when we don't feel okay. So they try to say things to make us okay, which actually end up making us feel dismissed and alone. You relate to this? I hope you relate to some of these. I hope you relate to a lot of them, actually. Not because I want any of this for you, but because this is kind of what widowhood is like. And I want you to know you're not alone. Two more things that I notice make widowhood very difficult, and we could argue are the most difficult parts. Nobody taught us how to befriend our nervous systems. Nobody taught us how to process our emotions. And then we show up into an experience that we didn't ask for, where we really need those skills, and we don't have them. More than ever, we would benefit from the ability to allow a feeling to flow through and to take care of our nervous system. And we don't know how to do it. And we might not realize that it's even a thing. And it is a thing. And we can learn it, but most of us don't show up prepared. I have hopes. It's one of my favorite things with working with my clients is that I know that this work will ripple into the world in ways that will impact future generations such that they will be more prepared than you and I were. So we take care of ourselves. We learn to befriend our nervous systems. We learn to process our emotions. We role model that to those around us, including our kids, even if they're grown. And someday we'll look back and say, remember when nobody talked about how to settle your nervous system? Remember when nobody talked about how to feel feelings? and it will feel foreign to us because it will be so common then. But right now, not so much. Okay, lastly, losing your partner brings with it an endless amount of secondary losses. And because most of us don't even have the language for this, we don't even know what a secondary loss is, which I'll explain in just a second. We often experience each new secondary loss as backsliding, which is so unnecessary. So primary loss is that your person died. Secondary loss is every loss that happens as a result of the primary one. So if you are now about to go to your daughter's wedding and your late husband is not there to walk her down the aisle, that in and of itself is a secondary loss. You imagined he would be there. She imagined he would be there. It feels like a loss. You wanted it to go one way. It went another. It is a loss. It wouldn't be that way if he were still alive. So that's a secondary loss. And there's so many of them, and they just keep coming. And so it's easy to just kind of go along and you feel like you're doing a little bit better and you're kind of got your Bambi legs, and then wham. Okay, now we're at the wedding and now we're crying and we're telling ourselves we've gone backwards and we're not doing something right with grief and what's our problem and shouldn't be this hard and shouldn't be crying in public and all these other judgments that we have. When what would be more helpful is to name it as a secondary loss and treat it as a new one, right? Acknowledge that each new secondary experience could be considered its own grief. And if we considered it that way, we'd be better able to support ourselves. We wouldn't make ourselves wrong for the experience that we're having, which is never helpful. Okay, so I'm sure you could add on to this list. In fact, if you would like to, if there's one that I missed that you feel is really important, feel free to email me, Krista@coachingwithkrista.com, and tell me. But those are some of the ones that I see the most. There is no one most difficult part about being a widow. There are many things that we experience as difficult. So what I want to do now is give you some ways to think about what is difficult, like what you are experiencing as difficult, in a way that makes it less difficult. Okay, so here we go. What is difficult for one person might not be as difficult for another. This doesn't mean anything about you or them. So if you are looking at someone else who is having an easier experience of something that is difficult for you, please don't make yourself wrong for that. Individual humans have individual experiences. They have individual things going on inside of their minds and bodies. So what's difficult for one might not be as difficult for another, and that doesn't mean anybody's wrong or right. It just means different people have different experiences. See a lot of compare and despair, and that just creates more suffering. And we're trying to make things less difficult, not more difficult. Of course, when we are experiencing something as difficult, we do not want it to be as difficult as it is. Of course we don't. And what's difficult for you now might not be what's difficult for you later. So we can hold on to that, right? We can hold on to, I don't want it to be this difficult, and it won't always be that way. We can let ourselves evolve without judging, without make it meaning anything, right? And when we're experiencing something as difficult, of course we don't want it to be difficult, but also it's not helpful to tell yourself that it shouldn't be so difficult. Think about times where you have done this, where something has been difficult for you, and your narrative was something like, this shouldn't be so difficult. Why can't you figure this out? Why is this so difficult for you? Right? It was an internal narrative that made you wrong for the level of difficulty that you were experiencing. Not helpful. If it's there and we make ourselves wrong for it, we make it harder to deal with what's there. Byron Katie, right? When we argue with reality, we lose, but only 100% of the time. If it's there, it should be there. Doesn't mean we want it to be there, but there it is. Should is kind of not even relevant at that point. There it is. So how do I want to treat myself given that it's there? Because it's there. I don't need to make myself wrong for anything that I feel. And when I do, I make it more difficult. Please, for the love of all things holy, do not use forced gratitude to gaslight yourself out of something that feels difficult to you. I am increasingly incensed when I see this. And I get it because we, and myself included, by the way, have all been taught to some extent that gratitude is superior, that we're supposed to be grateful. And it hurts my heart when I see us using that against ourselves. And what I mean by that is when you force yourself to be grateful, especially when it's about a situation that you aren't actually grateful for, right? That's a situation that's either harmful, a person that is harmful, or that has caused harm, and you buy into the idea that you have to be grateful for that situation or that person. And if you're not, you're doing something wrong. Oof. Please don't gaslight yourself out of something that feels difficult to you by using forced gratitude. It just distracts you from addressing the root of the problem. It just distracts you and makes it nearly impossible for you to support yourself. You do not have to be grateful for anything. So please don't use it against yourself. I also want you to be aware of sweeping generalizations that your brain might offer. Human brains have some wild stuff in there, some dramatic stuff in there, a lot of all or nothing thinking, a lot of black and white thinking. If left to our own devices, and if we believed every thought that popped up, it would be very easy to fall into an experience where we started to genuinely believe there was no hope for it to get better, that it was always going to be this hard. And I want you to be wary of that kind of thinking when it shows up. It might have the word always in it or the word never in it. So I'll always feel this way. I'll never feel that way. This is never going to get better. No one understands what this is like. I don't belong anymore, right? All of the, I'm totally alone. These kinds of sweeping, generalizing thoughts that train your brain to look for evidence to validate them, that reinforce themselves, that become beliefs if left unchecked. I want you to be aware of those because it makes difficult situations in widowhood more difficult. Okay. Let me give you a couple of tools that you can use. 2 tools. One is the and. Now, I have an entire episode of the podcast devoted to the and, so you can go back and listen to it if you would like. But the and is so helpful. Sometimes we just get this idea that we can only have one. Right? There's only one way of seeing this. It's either this is hard or this is easy. No, this is hard and I'm still showing up. I can either miss them or be grateful that they were here. No, I miss them and I am grateful that they were here. Or I miss them and I'm learning to live. I'm figuring out what my next steps are. I'm getting used to this, right? So use the and. Give yourself opportunities to allow contradictory emotions to exist at one time. We can hold more than one experience. We can hold more than one truth. We can hold more than one emotion. And that's so much easier to do if we add an and. So I want you to consider, where could I add an and? Where could again, I'm not telling myself something's easy. I might still be acknowledging that I am experiencing it as difficult. And what else do I want to say to myself? What else do I want to remind myself of? This is hard and I have some really good friends that I can lean on. Maybe that feels true to you. This is hard and I'm taking baby steps. Maybe that feels true to you. This is hard and I'm learning tools to support myself. This is hard and I'm not giving up. I'm still here. I'm still kicking. This is hard. And none of these feelings have killed me yet. I don't care what the and statement is. I want you to add it on. What do you want to tell yourself? Use the and. And the next thing I want to offer is that you can use your future self as a partner here, as a supportive partner. And I think I've done a podcast episode of this as well. Cannot remember off the top of my head. I think I did. But the idea, go to a place in your imagination in the future where you are experiencing things as less difficult. Maybe in that future place, you feel good again. Maybe in that future place, you just don't feel quite this bad, right? In that future place, things are easier. Maybe in that future place, you actually love your life. You could let yourself go there in your imagination. But go to the future where you genuinely imagine and believe in your imagination that it is better there. You are wiser. The weather is different. It's just different. And then imagine that version of you and ask her to give you advice. Ask her to tell you, what do you want me to remember about this difficult moment? What do you want me to know? What do you want to say to me? And let that future you talk to you. That future you has seen a bunch of stuff. She is in a place where she knows that you're going to be okay because she's looking back on the history of it, right? You're already okay in that future place where she lives. And she can look back and tell you, keep going. You're doing great. You're doing better than you think, right? Here's what I want you to stop doing. Here's what I want you to start doing. You can use her as a way to access your own inner wisdom, even if it requires your imagination. So in Mom Goes On, we do a practice with this. We actually, write it down. So you can do that too. All right. So consider the and. Yes, acknowledge the difficult truth. And what do I also want to remind myself of? And then future self, let's go to the future, use your imagination, let that version of you offer her wisdom to this version of you. Okay? So here's what you need to know. There is no one most difficult part about being a widow. There are just lots of difficult parts about being a widow. What's difficult for you might not be difficult for your neighbor. What's difficult for you now might not be what's difficult for you tomorrow or in a year from now, right? And you are not alone in experiencing any of these things as difficulties. I'm sure there are many more things that I didn't mention that might be difficult for you. And just because I didn't mention them doesn't mean you're wrong for experiencing them. If it's difficult for you, it is valid. And then we want to tell ourselves, okay, yes. And how do I talk to myself? How do I take what I'm experiencing as difficult, not make myself wrong for experiencing it this way, and then talk to myself in a way that creates more ease without using forced gratitude? Not necessary. All right? Okay. It is difficult, and you're doing it. All right? That's what I have for you this week. Remember, I love you. You've got this. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.